Good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining us for this timely conversation. My name is Maria Fernanda Wozmoski. I'm lead for Central America here at the Adrienne Arsht Latin America Center at the Atlantic Council. And Minister José Ramón Icaza, it is such an honor to sit next to you for this very timely conversation. Thank you for taking your time to share your perspective. It's such a critical topic for Panama, for the region, and for the world. For everyone who's watching us online, you will have an opportunity to submit questions. Use the hashtag, askac.org, hashtag AC Central America, if you're on social media, to tweet about this conversation as it happens and unfolds. So Minister, together with the Suez Canal, the Panama Canal is a major artery of global trade. You know the numbers better than me, but it's around 5% of global trade that goes through the canal. Despite global headwinds and tariff tensions, I think we'll hear from you that in this past fiscal year, numbers have increased in terms of ships that have transited across the canal and tons of cargo as well. But the success of the Panama Canal, which is a 111-year engineering feat, is also facing mounting challenges. We're seeing shifting trade routes, growing competition, water scarcity, and climate pressures. But you have anticipated this, you're working on this. There's an $8.5 billion, 5 to 7 year plan that is in motion. And you'll talk about some of the key projects, but Minister Icaza, I want to start with the big elephant in the room before we go into those projects and those questions, and it's the CK Hutchinson deal that we heard about earlier in the year. There's been some roadblocks, some obstacles. What is the status of that?
Well, thank you, and I want to thank you, the Atlantic Council, for the opportunity to have me here to talk a little bit more about the Panama Canal and the Republic of Panama. And to frame this dialogue, I wanted to focus on three main areas. First, the Panama Canal strategic plan for the next 10 years, where we are in the strategic project that we are promoting and pursuing, and finally, the US-Panama relationship, which is very important for us, and probably is the most important topic that we are going to cover. So in terms of the CK Hutchinson deal, as you may know, it was announced back in March 6, 2025, where BlackRock and MSC announced that they did a bid to take over 43 ports, which included 2 ports in Panama, Balboa and Cristobal. And they had a window to close that deal that it already passed that date. So right now, that deal is inconclusive. What we know as Panama is that the General Controller placed a legal action against the process of the extension of the contract, and that is in the Supreme Court waiting for a final judgment. We, as the Republic of Panama, we are working on a plan in the case that the ruling goes against the extension of the contract. And in that case, we have to step in as the Panama Maritime Authority to take control of that concession without generating a disruption of the supply chain. We have to know that Balboa managed one of the most important hubs for Maersk. The network of Maersk operating with 6 hubs, and Balboa is one of those 6 hubs. And in Cristobal, it's MSC, the one that is managing most of the cargo. And also they operate from Cristobal, their network. So what we are trying to preserve is the resilience of the supply chains, and so we don't have a disruption if that happens. The other scenario could happen is that at some point, the Republic of Panama can have a mutual agreement with CK Hutchinson, and in order to have an orderly transition of those port concessions. But in any case, the Republic of Panama is getting prepared for whatever happens to those port concessions. And the message that I want to send to to the US and the international community is that we are planning ahead if that is the case. If something happens with those concessions and we have to step in, be ready to manage those concessions with an interim operator and then do a bidding process for a new concession if that is the ruling and the judgment of the Supreme Court.
Thank you, Minister. I want to also talk about more specifically the projects that have been recently announced. I was alluding to several major projects, including the Rio Indio water reservoir, the LNG pipeline that would connect the Atlantic and the Pacific, and also the construction of two new cargo handling ports, which also goes in line with what's happening with the CK Hutchinson ports. Can you please walk us through what these projects are, where they stand, and how do they fit into what you were talking about, this strategic plan for the Panama Canal, 10 years?
Well, yeah, sure, certainly. So since last year, July 1st, when we assumed this responsibility, one of our first tasks is to work on a strategic plan for the Panama Canal Authority for 2025-2035, understanding that the last strategic plan was from 2005 to 2025. So we start working with McKinsey to elaborate a strategic plan where we identify 12 strategic blocks and 38 actions. Out of those 12 strategic blocks, we have been presented the one that are a strategic project, which is Rio Indio, the new gas pipe, new port terminals, and interoceanic highway that will, when you add up those four strategic projects, we are working to enhance the value of the Panama Canal route and to really create an ecosystem that could integrate all the logistic and transportation assets that we have in Panama. So let me start with Rio Indio. Rio Indio is a project that is very important not only for the Panama Canal transits. We will give you enough water for the coming 50 years, but also it's very important for the Panamanian for water consumption. Every day we take out the equivalent of 8 transits from the lakes of the Panama Canal for water consumption. And we have to replenish that to give resilience, but also certainty to the industry and also to Panamanian that we're going to have sufficient water for the next decades. Rio Indio will give us the equivalent of between 11 to 15 transits per day. So where we are right now, we are working with local communities because it will require a resettlement of 2,500 Panamanians, 550 families in 38 communities. These are very small villages or small communities that are in the blueprint of the footprint, of Rio Indio, which is almost 10,000 acres. So that is happening right now following the process of IFC, of World Bank, that will take us to a process where we have this participation platform where we communicate with the communities and with the Panamanians so they can understand how the process of resettlement is going to be done. That is happening right now. We already have 4 out of 7 meetings, and we conclude that by the end of this year. So by 2026, we hope to start the resettlement of the Panamanians that are in the footprint of the Rio Indio. And at the same time, we are working with the geotechnical analysis and the engineering part of that project so we can beat out that project by the end of 2026 and start construction in 2027. We estimate that the construction of Rio Indio will take us 42 months. That's the Rio Indio project. We feel positive. It has the full support of President Molino and the national government, and we are working with the communities in order to have an orderly resettlement, always respecting the human rights of the people that lives in the footprints of Rio Indio.
Thank you. This modernization plan that you've outlined will strengthen not only Panama's own competitiveness. You've alluded Panama needs water levels to not disrupt the industry. And the world depends on the canal functioning smoothly and operating smoothly. There's also an opportunity or a window for Panama to be a major player in also reshaping energy logistics and trade flows. Can you talk about the LNG pipeline more specifically? Because that kind of, for that kind of vessel to come through the canal requires, I believe, more water, is more complicated. Not all the locks are up to date to handle them. Have you done any studies to
Sure.
kind of map out how this pipeline will change energy logistics?
Sure, and before switching to the energy corridor, I just want to mention also that the drought that we experienced back in 2023 was the third most severe drought ever recorded in the history of the Panama Canal. Okay. And I know that it had an impact on global supply chain. And that's why we are taking action. We are taking immediate action with Rio Indio, and also we understood how to manage water better, to be better prepared for the next severe drought that could happen between now and when we are ready, when we finish Rio Indio. The energy corridor is for LPG. We have been studying this market for many, many years. And back in 2022, we received the interest of a company that wanted to build a gas pipe for LPG through the Panama Canal. So according to our rules of regulation for concession procedure, we accepted the private initiative proposal that opened up the bidding process for the gas pipe. We have been working with U.S. company in financial, legal, technical, and social, environmental, in order to present to the market the gas pipe. So that's what we did back in September 18, when we did the market outreach. We invite the companies to come to Panama, where we presented the project. Now we are in the process of the one-on-one meetings that is going to happen the third week of November, starting the third week of November, when we will receive more feedback from the industry in order to define the project and the business model that we are going to then present to the market for the pre-qualification phase that will happen in Q1 of 2026, and then the bidding process that will happen between Q2 and Q3 of 2026. Once we finish this process, we will start construction probably by the end of 2026. Okay. LPG is a very important segment for U.S. exports that goes to Northeast Asia. And right now, the Panama route between the Gulf, the Gulf Coast and Northeast Asia crosses, almost 100% crosses the Panama Canal or uses the Panama Canal route. And it represents around 15% of the total transit that transit the Panama Canal. We're talking about 1,800 transits out of 13,000 that we have every year. So by doing that, by taking those transits out of the maritime route and putting it in a gas pipe, it's an indirect way to increase capacity for the maritime route, because that will liberate between 3 to 5 transits per day for cargo, for LNG. Remember that LNG uses the Neo-Panamax because of the size of the vessel, so that will be very important also for dry bulk and for other segments. So it's a way to increase capacity. So we are increasing capacity through water projects, but also by doing the gas pipe. So we believe that this is a very strategic project for United States and for the Western Hemisphere allies that definitely wants to be sure that the Panama Canal route is going to be reliable and resilient to climate change or any other, threat or risk that could happen.
Yeah, you have a very important job in making sure you're stress testing the canal, making sure that you can anticipate all types of risks, whether they be climate-induced, even, I would imagine, cyber-induced. You're doing a great job. And I also wanted to ask you on that point. You're mentioning the United States. Obviously, they say that there's no such thing as bad press. President Donald Trump has been very focused on the canal since even before he took office. I would imagine that U.S. companies have approached you on these projects. So how are U.S. stakeholders positioning themselves to participate in this next phase of the history of the canal? Could you talk about that?
Well, definitely, I believe that transparency is very important in order to attract a U.S. company. So that's why we did the market outreach. It was organized by Morgan Stanley with the help of Sullivan and Cromwell and ACP, the Panama Canal Authority. And that's why we have been managing the process in a way that we build trust. And the American companies feels that it's going to be a process where they are going to have the opportunity and creating a balance, a level playing field based on transparency and trust that they can participate in this process. But also we recognize that this is an American, energy product. And we know that we have to have a communication with the US government, with state, with energy, and with transportation in order that we can communicate, but also with Congress. Actually, I just came from a few meetings in the Congress, so they can understand the project and why we are doing what we are doing, so we can have that communication to build trust and transparency.
Thank you for that response. I also wanted to talk about leaving Panama for a second and more focusing on the global picture, international picture, because the Canal Authority and President Molino have been seeking support, international support for the projects. They've also expressed interest in adopting lessons from other ports. Could you talk a little bit about the role that the international community is playing in these projects at the canal, and what additional opportunities do you see for whether it be technological or infrastructure partnerships around some of these initiatives that you're undertaking?
Sure. The Panama Maritime Authority recently hired an external consultant to help us out to map out the opportunities, but also how we can improve our rules and regulation at the Panama Maritime Authority. We are working with MTBS company, which is a well-known consultant in maritime industry. So we are working with them, but also at the same time, we are reviewing how we can strengthen our rules of regulation of AMP, and we have had some communication with political leaders, but also with our Congress or Asamblea, to how we can improve our legal framework in order to be more effective and have a more robust law that can also help us to manage better our concession. That takes me also to what we are doing in the ACP and the Panama Canal Authority. And as I mentioned before, we have 4 strategic projects. And one of those projects is the development of Corozal in the Pacific side and in Telfers in the Atlantic side. Right now, our ports in Panama are at almost full capacity. Last year, we managed 9.4 million TEUs, and and that's almost, we are maxing out total capacity. By doing so, by doing Corozal and Telfers, we will be increasing capacity by around 50%, because Corozal could be 3 million TEUs, and Telfers could be another additional 3 million TEU. So we are working in parallel, because it's a concession also, we are working in parallel doing the studies, updating the one that we have for Corozal, but doing the study for Telfers. We will be doing the market outreach of the port concession on October 27. We already submit the invitation to the interest company on those port concession. Then the first week of December, we will be doing the one-on-one meetings, and then doing the pre-qualification process, Q1, then doing the bidding process between Q2 and Q3 of 2026. So we believe that we can have a company doing the design, build, transfers, and operate of those ports concession by 2027. And the information that we have from the market is that it could take them around 42 months to have them completed. So Panama is taking action, and we understand our strategic position, our strategic asset that serve the world, and that we have to invest, as we have been doing in the past, for the coming years.
Yeah, I think something that is striking is that obviously all of these mega projects will happen, you'll see the fruits of these beyond this administration, and it's really that Plan País that you're seeing, this administration leaving a legacy, leaving the seeds for this down the road, and really understanding the importance of the canal for the world. I wanted to take a moment and ask you one of these questions that we're getting from the audience online, and I think something that we haven't talked about, but is of interest in today's world is security.
Sure.
So let me play this question here from Robert Sheretta. What additional steps are being taken for security at both the free trade zone and at the canals to monitor shipping and containers?
Well, one concrete action was the signing of the MOU with Secretary Hexet back in April. And that enables more cooperation between Panama, the US, and other countries in the exercises that we do in the Panama Canal entrance, both in the Pacific side, also in the Atlantic side. But also, the Panama Canal has signed some sort of MOUs with DHS and DOD in order to enhance our system and strengthen our system in terms of security and cybersecurity. So we receive, because of the DHS assessment, a checklist of things that we can do, and we are doing it right now in order to improve our system. And the same happened with DOD, where they presented us their initial assessment, and we are working together with the US Southcom in order to strengthen our capacity in terms of security and cybersecurity, because we understand that the Panama Canal is a strategic asset, and it's very important to be ready for all the threats and the risks associated with security and cybersecurity.
Thank you. Yeah, I think maybe for another future conversation that we could have is going more in depth into these cybersecurity questions, which I think are very top of mind. Let me pull another one here from Javiera Garcia, which is a follow-up to something that we were talking about earlier, the scenarios that you outlined. If you have to launch a bidding process for the Balboa and Cristobal ports, how long would it take to award a new concession, and who would take operations in the meantime?
Well, it all depends on what happened. I know, right now there are many scenarios, as I mentioned. There is a deal that right now is, it was not concluded with CK Hutchinson, BlackRock, MSC. That deal is not dead. I mean, like, it's happening. It's alive. Let's say that it's alive. Then we have the ruling or the judgment, the final judgment that the Supreme Court is going to do. Or it's also another scenario that we can end up, in some sort of agreement with CK Hutchinson and take control. So we don't control what is going to happen. We don't control the scenarios. But what I can say is that President Molino and a few members of its cabinet, including myself, we are working on a plan in any of those scenarios that if we have to take control of Balboa and Cristobal, we don't create a disruption in supply chain in the region and obviously in the world. Let's assume that we need to enter and we have an interim operator. I believe, or we are seeing that could take us maybe between 12 to 18 months to prepare a tender to go to the market once we are ready for a new contract or new concession contract. And under Panamanian law, those concession contracts usually is 20 years plus an extension of 20 years if they comply with the contract.
So probably not the preferred outcome scenario for what's happening right now.
I mean, I think it's 25 years, I'm sorry.
I think, so we have time for one more question from Bob Kolopai. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. But it appears that a period of deglobalization may occur in both the short and long term, significantly reducing transshipping volumes. Rather than expanding capacity, are there meaningful efforts underway to improve the cost efficiency of the canals?
Sure. So one of the projects that we are also working on and planning is how to increase capacity through the transfer of cargo through an interoceanic highway, which will not only increase capacity to transfer cargo through another dry canal. Remember that we have a railroad, we have a highway that connects Panama with Colón in the east side, and we will be doing the interoceanic highway in the west bank. But that highway will enable a piece of land of 10,000 acres that the Panama Canal have in the west side of the Panama Canal. And we are working right now, as I mentioned before, in the strategic plan, we work with McKinsey, and now we are working, we will be working with probably a US company for the land planning to see how we can increase capacity for more economic free zones or logistic areas that can enable more investment, and also, why not, maybe light manufacturing production or manufacturing in Panama for production of last mile. We believe that we have a competitive advantage in packaging and logistics. So we can be a place in the center of the hemisphere for the last mile of production, assembly, packaging, testing and logistics of those materials. So that's a way also to promote more trade using Panama as a logistic and transportation platform. We are also working in the Tocumen airport, what could be, the new cargo and logistic terminal in Tocumen airport. And we also have some interest of companies that want to, install their headquarters in that airport for cargo and logistics.
And the underlying thing here to everything you're saying, ATP, all of this is jobs. And we just last week was the IMF World Bank meetings, and that's what we heard from the World Bank president is jobs, jobs, jobs. We need quality jobs, and it seems like there are so many windows of opportunity in Panama to create very high-quality jobs that are much needed with, even some of the recent closures that have happened in Panama with, big companies. With that, I would like to thank all of you for joining us today here in person and virtually. Thank you for listening, tuning in. This is the first of more conversations that we'll have on Panama and the canal. And Minister, again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your perspective.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity.